political analyst. We also have with me in studio Sandra Ochola, who's a governance analyst, and Dr. Sam Kamau, who is a political analyst. I'll start with you, Dr. Kamau. Why did the exercise collapse? What do you think went wrong?
I think we have used the word shambolic to describe the nomination process, and I think it has become a byword now. That is something we are going to be interchanging with nominations. But if you look at it, Jubilee had a whole week to learn from the challenges that faced ODM when they started their exercises. But if you look at it, the same mistakes, the same challenges, they have succumbed to the same. And going forward, the cancellation of the total failure, the total chaos of the whole process emanated from the fact that they never learned the lesson. So I would also talk about incompetence. Trying to pass the blame maybe to the people who are printing ballot papers for the shortage is unacceptable. You cannot take 200 ballot papers to a station that has over 2,000 registered people. It is incompetence, and I think they have to own up and accept that they made mistakes. So the other issues that have to do with the delay in delivery of voting material, and also the issue of the party register, these are issues that they knew would come up, and they were not able to address or come up with alternatives in terms of addressing all the issues that came up. And finally, here they are.
Java, still on the same, when did the rain start beating Jubilee? Like Dr. Kamau is saying, that they had a whole week to learn, lessons to draw from the experience of the opposition. What do you think went wrong?
Well, William, I'll give you a very plain answer, one without horns or teeth, that what has been witnessed today is a function of a lack of polycentric planning on the part of the Secretariat and the entire Jubilee team. And here, of course, it's evident that they are working on assumptions. Yes, it has been presented to the country in the past 1 week and even the past couple of weeks that Jubilee was ready for this exercise. In fact, some party members had indicated that they want to demonstrate that actually they are on top of things and that actually they will be the teaching aid for successful primaries. And what we have seen today is something that is inverse to that kind of expectation. Well, at the risk of sounding or passing very harsh judgment, I think the collapse of this exercise today has rendered Raphael Tuju, the Secretary General of the Jubilee Party, as the poster face for poor planning in electoral primaries for Jubilee.
And Sandra, some of the concerns that led to the cancellation, and of course a bulk of our messages coming in saying that the electorate had faith and that this process would be flawless because the Secretariat has been talking to the media regularly, giving us hope that this will be a flawless progress. Where then did things go wrong?
Thank you, Lillian. I look at that from two perspectives. One, from the aspect that Jubilee as a party and through its Secretariat and officials did a good job at informing the public prior to the primaries. But then again, you realize this could have been their undoing because the information going out, or rather what people are talking about now, is the fact that the whole primary exercise was perhaps oversold or overhyped, and a lot of time was taken giving media briefings as opposed to planning effectively. And of course now, as two other panelists have mentioned, it is unfortunate. The turn of events is really unfortunate, given that a lot of people woke up very early in the morning to come and cast their vote. The aspirants were pretty ready to be elected today, but that did not happen. And the challenges, of course, as we mentioned earlier, come with the logistical preparation and in terms of having the adequate human, technical, and operational resources. But then one thing, Lillian, one thing I appreciate with Jubilee is the fact that they have the humility to accept that indeed things did not go right, things did not go well as planned, and they have the humility to accept that there were flaws, and they're working towards hopefully repairing that in the future.
Dr. Kamau, the fact that they now must go back to the drawing board and they're slated to have a meeting with the president, the conversation that is likely to happen in that closed-door meeting.
Well, if you look at it, of course, we have just a few days remaining until the nominations conclude. Therefore, the information we expect them to tell us is exactly when the nominations will be done, especially for the areas that were marked by, especially what you would call their strongholds. So the issue is in terms of telling us whether they are ready for that, whether there will be sufficient ballot papers. For example, they are told us that they were printed abroad. Do they have enough time to actually get a fresh supply of that? On the other thing is, are they going, because they told us that they had security features on all these ballot papers, are they going to change these things because now most of the candidates or aspirants or even some of the voters are exposed to some of this material? The other issue, of course, is whether they have money to run the nominations, because I'm sure they had also spent quite some money. Are they also going to hold responsible people who were involved in mismanaging the process? Have they also learned from some of the challenges that they faced in terms of why they delivered some of the material late? I think there are so many questions that have come up, and as we wait for them to tell us, inform us tomorrow when the nominations will be, they still have to assure the people, because many people did not expect that it would be this chaotic. We knew there would be challenges, but people did not expect that it would lead to total recall of the whole process, just because people were not adequately prepared, or because the elections management board spent so much time assuring the people but really not getting ready. Because the challenges that came up today are not unusual. They are things that have been happening to the other parties, but the fact that they actually led to a total collapse of the entire process says a lot about the preparation process.
And Jarvis, Dr. Kamau is talking about lessons learned by the Secretariat and indeed Jubilee, coming after today's process. But what about the voter? We've seen our reporters in various parts of the country where the primaries were happening, talking about a lot of fatigue and indeed fury coming from this very disorganized exercise. Could this affect the voter come the repeat exercise? Are we likely to see voter apathy?
Well, it will definitely affect the voter turnout in the end. But I think as a political party, and any political party, and its leaders must be servants to strategy. It goes without saying, by the evidence of what occurred today, that political parties in this country have not learned from past mistakes, past primaries, and the only lesson we learn from this is that there's nothing we learn from the historical experiences, from the challenges that our past political parties have faced, and that refusal to learn will perpetually lead to the recurrence of these challenges time and again. For example, today in the evening, when the Secretary General was addressing the nation and the supporters of Jubilee Party about the botched primaries, he said that they're going to release a new schedule for by tomorrow. But you see, there are a couple of other things that it would have been prudent and important for the Secretary General to speak to. One, the issue of the commitment of their members coming out in large numbers at the at dawn, and then staying put throughout the day, and yet in the end the party lets them down. Second thing was the question of handling the disciplinary issues about all those who tampered with the electoral materials, the burning of the ballot papers, etc. We have seen vandalization of property, schools, etc. How is the party going to respond to this? Who is going? Are they going to investigate this and have individuals brought to book?
And just holding on to that point, Jarvis, there are those who are asking whether this is sabotage or mismanagement. When you see people deliberately, destroying ballot material, it raises those concerns.
Well, it is a fusion of many things. One, there is the apathy, there is the anger, there is the frustration, and then also there is the legitimate discontent of the followers of the party, the members of the party, being let down by the party's secretariat, because by the assurance that the party had given that this process is going to be flawless, the assurance that they've got all the logistical arrangements made, it led to having their members satisfied that this process is going to be all right. And then you come the D-Day, you realize that all that was only mouth deep. And that kind of frustration is what could have led to this kind of disappointment in the eyes and the hearts and the minds of the party members, who then executed that by destroying party materials.
And Sandra, less than 4 days to the deadline for the nominations. What are we likely to see? What scenario are we likely to see as regards what will come out from the deliberations within the Jubilee top tier? Are they likely to stagger the days that they will hold the nominations, or are we likely to see a one-day affair once again?
It's difficult to preempt at the moment because another challenge they will likely face the fact that they're also looking forward to holding primaries in a place like Nairobi, which already is already quite tense at the moment. So having postponed the other primaries, I think it goes back to them to more or less to the original plan of holding the primaries within a very constrained period. And just like the other panelists have mentioned, it's very important for them to now look through how they're going to address the shortcomings that they've witnessed in these 2 days. Of course, they're going to work through a very tight schedule, as mentioned, but then what will separate them from the rest of the pack, so to speak, is how they're going to address these issues that may arise in terms of availing material, in terms of having the right logistical support to one way or another save face and ensure that the voters are getting the free, fair and transparent election that they had anticipated today.
And Dr. Kamal, this is a highly contested exercise. So not just with Jubilee, but also the opposition, the aspirants who opt to, or rather who fall out of these nominations for whatever reasons, what scenarios are we likely to see play out? Will we be seeing cases where people are pursuing their interests as independent candidates, or even jumping ship altogether?
I think from what we have seen so far, especially started in Busia, where there was a dispute about the process, and I think today we saw now Dr. Otoma has decided to go as an independent. Definitely because of the chaos and the confusion that has characterized the entire nomination process, we'll see many people crying foul. There will be a bit of time for people to resolve the issues. I think going all the way up to 20th of May, there will be time to settle some of the disputes. But what is inevitable is that we'll definitely see some people cry foul and move out because of the restriction on party hopping. Most of the scenario that we're likely to see is people running as independent. That is likely to happen. But more significantly, what will have an impact on the August elections is the fact that some voters or supporters of certain candidates who will feel that their candidate was treated unfairly during the process are likely to stay away from the process, and these will definitely affect the or rather bring about apathy in some of the cases in terms of turnout for the strongholds of the particular candidate.
Dr. Kamau, sorry,
yes.
Stay away from the process even after the vast investment that has been put in by some of these aspirants, the cost implication for them?
Well, if you look at it, definitely they have invested a lot in terms of time and money. And of course, you have also seen them, especially coming from the Rift Valley. They have been crying foul and saying that there is interference coming from top party officials or maybe some powerful people within government. Because of this, I have said it's likely to have a direct impact on how voters will perceive or interpret the whole exercise. And these disgruntled people are likely to have a significant impact on how people will feel forward, the confidence going forward in facing the general election.
Javas, the IBC had steered clear over these party nominations. Is this probably what they foresaw when they said they were not going to participate in these political party nominations?
There are lots of competing interests, of course, but I want to pleasantly imagine that IBC is taking notes when all this is happening, because as all this is happening at the watch of the entire country, 4 months from today, we know very well that all sides will be trained to the work that IBC will be doing. And of course, very well, IBC appreciated that there were lots of competing interests, political interests, that could have led it to burn its fingers, because if there was all sorts of interference, etc., and of course, in the end, there was the pregnant question about who is going to finance this entire exercise, if at all IBC was to oversee the primaries for political parties. It is something that maybe we may want to entertain for future times, because if political parties have demonstrated, convincingly so, that it is difficult for them to manage effectively their own primaries, then maybe they may want to request for the assistance of the expertise and the machinery that the IBC has.
And Sandra, as we continue with this conversation, going back earlier to the Secretariat's press conference, press briefing, if you like, when Raphael Tuju earlier on said that the exercise had been called off in certain areas, and then later on, shortly after, there was an announcement that they'd be making another you know, they'd be briefing the press again, and, you know, they called off the entire exercise. Looking at Raphael Tuju, the party secretary general, would you say that, you know, this information was dictated upon on him? He seemed to be a man under siege. I stand to be corrected. What did you observe? What did you take out of that whole 1 minute, we're calling off the exercise in some parts, and then, you know, shortly afterwards we're calling off the exercise in its entirety?
Well, I think Raphael is between between a rock and a hard place, because given the nature of the post, given the nature of the position, rather, he has a lot at stake as a person and also professionally. But my own perspective is, despite all this, I could say he's done the best he could, given that most of what you're dealing with human beings, under circumstances that truly you are not able to control. One thing I admired about him was his diplomatic way of handling the situation, which in my perspective you will have witnessed other incidences of perhaps losing cool, losing control and all that. He was very diplomatic in the process. And also allowing for better communication moving forward. It's also important for him to work with the aspirants, work with the other members of the Secretariat to ensure that his image and also the image of the party itself is not rubbished further.
Javas, the same question to you, just forwarding the same, and also you know, the element of the IEBC register. The party secretary general actually said that they use the IEBC register as a backup as opposed to the party membership register. So 1 minute, you know, saying this, and then the next minute actually, 1 minute actually saying that they had faith in some areas such as Muranga, and then the next minute coming out and saying that no, the entire exercise has been called off.
Perhaps if I were to do a note to Honorable Tuju, I would say please, he needs to pull up his socks from around the anklets, because the longer they stay there, the more the heat is directed at him. And you know, the question of the kind of party, the lists to use, is a question that is all about open primaries or closed primaries. And if it's a question of handling these as closed primaries, then entirely it must be dictated and guided by the party list. If it's open primaries, then it could be other persons that are not necessarily members of that party, or even if it could be members of that party, but looking at the registered voters through the IEBC list. So a political party must actually come out clear whether it wants to have an open primary or a closed primary. And through this we have seen that you know, the Jubilee party has not been very clear as to whether they want to have an open primary or closed primary. Even the other parties, whether it's ODM, ANC, etc., that challenge of using either party list or an IEBC list, because purely when you look at IEBC list, unless you want to put it side by side with the party list, it is not, IEBC is not about the party and its members. So a political party needs to determine what kind of primary it wants to have, and then by doing that, it determines what kind of list then it will want to depend on.
And as we close this conversation, Dr. Kamau, the party secretary general was very candid when he said that among some of the challenges that they experienced was that they did not anticipate such a large turnout. So lessons drawn out of today's experience to ensure that whatever date they come up with for when this exercise will be repeated, that their logistics will be better managed, and of course that this will be a better organized affair.
Well, Lillian, like I pointed out earlier, the issues that were going to come up were known. For example, the issue of the party list. They knew that IEBC has not finished updating or auditing the voters register as per the 2017 registrations. Therefore, the names that were going to appear are those of people who participated in the 2013 elections. That means anybody who transferred or fresh registrations were not going to participate, and that was a really big issue. The second thing, in terms of not anticipating the expected turnout, definitely the candidates, and you saw it, for example, for the positions of the MCA, there are so many aspirants in any specific ward, and therefore you expected a high turnout because all these candidates are definitely mobilizing their people. But I would still say it's an excuse for their incompetence in terms of delivering just 200 ballot papers in a polling station where you have over 2,000 registered members. You would definitely have expected, even if the turnout is not always that high during the nomination exercise, they would have at least availed sufficient or enough material. In some cases, the material arrived quite late. So from where I sit, or how I look at it in terms of lessons learned, the party has to sufficiently, and they only have about 2 days to prepare for this because Monday will just come. Postponing the exercise has not taken away the issues. They only have 2 days to prepare in terms of making sure for example, Nairobi that was to do their nominations on Monday, or the other counties that are to do it on Tuesday, do they have sufficient material, or are they going to experience the same challenges? And I can almost predict the same issues will come up on Monday or on Tuesday whenever they decide to hold these things. You still see ballot material arriving late. You still see confusion, especially on the issue of party register. Now, I would not agree that in terms of communication they have done a good job, because you saw there are some things they were saying at the party headquarters, but on the ground the returning officers and other officials were saying different things. So that confusion did not even help the situation, because on the ground some of the officials did not know how to respond or how to address the issues.
And as we close, final words from you, Sandra, and Jarvis. I'll start with you, Jarvis. Who should take responsibility on the issue of the shortage of the ballot papers? Less than 50% of the ballot material arriving, deployment of ballot papers not commensurate to the number of registered voters, and the fact that we're now anticipating a repeat exercise. But somebody must take responsibility for this.
It is the entire secretariat. The entire Jubilee Party Secretariat must be the curators of this entire political process. The frustrations faced by the candidates and the followers of that party. Elections are very competitive and very expensive affair. Very many candidates have expended lots and lots of money, colossal amounts, and yet now this process has to be prolonged a little longer. That means even more expenditure. It is important, and it behooves the entire secretariat, led by the top officials and through the Secretary General, for them to come out and speak to the hearts and minds of their members and the candidates, and actually just express their regret at this kind of logistical nightmare and how this entire thing has aborted. So it is the honors of the party secretariat to come out on that.
Sandra, as we close.
I agree with Jarvis that a lot falls on the secretariat in terms of preparing, in terms of logistics, in terms of communication, and indeed moving on for the next 2 days, it is important for them to try and rectify the shortcomings that have been there. But I'm also choosing to be optimistic, not only for this nomination process, and not only for Jubilee and not only for ODM, but also for the IBC, that we've been talking initially about us taking lessons and learning lessons from these two processes. And my deepest prayer, my deepest desire is that the IBC has learned from what's happening within the primaries and is taking notes in readiness for the August 8th election, so that we don't have the same issues cropping up when we're having the general election, and also to foster voter confidence in our electoral process. Thank you.
Thanks indeed. That is Sandra Ochola. She's a governance analyst. Also with us in studio this evening, Jarvis Bigambo, political analyst, and Dr. Sam Kamau, political analyst. Many thanks indeed for being with us this evening. We are just about to wind up, but before that, we want to take a look at reactions on social media.